Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Autistic Tidbits and Tangents podcast. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Kara Dymond. I'm an autistic elementary school teacher, university lecturer, and author from Toronto, Canada. And with me is...
Hi. I've changed clothes again, but I'm still in the same space, so that's going to really change everyone's mind. My name is Bruce Petherick. I am the Autistic Advocate at Autism Canada. I was a professional musician, maybe still am, and I am speaking to you from Paradise, otherwise known as Vancouver, British Columbia.
Hashtag life goals. I'd love to move there one day. Retirement plan. So anyway, I'm already going off on tangents and we haven't even started officially. We are going to be talking today a little bit about autism advocacy and, some of the difficulties we come up against and the need to sometimes
compromise.
That's a good way of putting it. All right.
Welcome to Autistic Tidbits and Tangents.
Candid conversations between autistic off-hour professionals.
Cool.
Trigger warnings for this episode include ableism, behaviorism, misgendering, and of course, the white middle class problem of autism advocacy. So, Bruce, I wanted to give a little Maja update. I Zoomed with her the other day, which was nice, not for very long. She always has to find time in between, when the baby needs her. So she is, she's doing as well as I think could be expected. Baby is wonderful, but she's tired. Getting into a schedule is hard. But she looks great. Baby is so wonderful. I was just delighted. Got to Zoom with the baby. So yeah, it was nice to touch base.
Did you get to reach out and?
I could almost. It felt like it. That cute aggression, I just want to squeeze you a little bit. Those cheeks.
How old is the young one?
So almost. What did we say? Is it almost? Born at the end of June. I can't do the math. July, okay. August, September, October, November. Almost 5 months.
4 to 5 months.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's cool. The Maja update. Now, the Bruce update. So, Bruce, you were working your tail off all last week and into the weekend for the Awesome Conference.
I have been working my tail off all month. It is Autism Acceptance Month here in Canada. And so we had at Autism Canada, we had a couple of projects going on. It's usually the month where we get media reaching out to us the most, and I tend to handle almost all our media. But the most important thing for me was our Awesome Conference, spelled AUSOME. I'm not 100% happy with the name, but it's one of those things you join an organization, they've been running something for a couple of years, and it's like, that's the name. Okay. And I have been basically almost all my every day, I've been working, getting presentations ready and doing all the technical prep. And it was a pretty intense couple of weeks. And the conference was Friday night, Toronto time, and Saturday morning, Toronto time, and it was finished by before 12 o'clock my time.
Oh wow!
And it was a little. Oh, okay.
And then it was probably like, what do I do with the rest of my day and my weekend?
Actually, I had this is the insanity of my family. My wife had a craft market, a witches market to go to on Saturday night. So basically, I finished the conference, helped Meredith pack the car up, and then we drove off to the middle of downtown Vancouver, did the market, and came home about midnight. Just before midnight, we were back home. Sunday was a day off, and then Monday I went to Seattle for no reason other than Seattle's only a couple of hours south of us. So
I know the reason.
Actually, no, it really, we were going to go to a museum, the Seattle Art Museum, but unfortunately it's closed on Mondays. Okay. So we just hung around Seattle for a little while.
This had nothing to do with your recent birthday?
Whatever are you insinuating? I did not have a birthday. Yes, it was my dad PayPal'd me some birthday money. So
wow,
yes, we used money. Yeah. Okay. And then so a day off yesterday, on Monday, I should say, and then I've had 3 media interviews in the last 2 days. So it's a little bit whoosh.
I understand.
And what's been going on with you,
ma'am? I, like you, have too many things on my plate. Besides my regular teaching job and my university evening teaching job, which is great. I love both of them. I'm participating in I'm a researcher doing a self-study with 2 other researchers into accessible education and universal design for learning use in post-secondary higher education, which I'm excited about. It's another thing I'm doing though. I'm also doing another kind of related paper with someone else. So to be announced, all of these things. I'm working on my book. Got a little bit of writing done this weekend, but it never feels like enough. And I was, sort of in the midst of a move that stretched out for about 6 weeks. So there has not been much downtime for me in the last month and a half, and I am very tired.
I should point out that both you and I are busy. You're sounding a little busier than I didn't know about these research projects, so congratulations on those. But I am also pleased to note that I do notice on your Instagram regular forest walks.
Yes.
And there are still walks to the beach for us here that I'm still glad that we are both taking some time to relax and things.
I do try to take my own advice, and I tell my students, young and old, that like self-care is the most important thing. You know, I would much rather they skip a reading and spend half an hour doing something that restores them in those tough weeks when they feel like there's a lot of deadlines. We actually, this is a Maja Toudal concept of energy accounting, but we need to do the things that are restorative, that replenish us, to have the energy for all of the things that take away from our energy stores. So it seems counterintuitive, but especially when you have a lot of things on your plate, you need to not let those things slide, because we do have a tendency in the productivity culture we work in and live in to think, oh, I'll feel guilty if I read this book for pleasure, or I'll feel guilty if I watch this TV show. No, make sure you do those things, even more so.
I think I've mentioned on the podcast a couple of times, but I'm appreciative that at work I was informed that I had a lunch hour, and I have been, even this month where it would have been easier to work through lunch, I have really, really consciously tried to go for a walk during lunch hour. And also I have a pile of books about autism that I'm actually pushing away. I pushed them away for a little while because I think the worst thing that I could have done this month was to continue reading more books while trying to manage a conference.
Yes.
The books are still there.
But yes, and I mean will that in a good
way. They are. I mean, in fact, one's here and 2 are on the bedside table.
Yeah.
And I'll pick them up. Actually, I'll still probably pick them up at the end of this week. And it's interesting that you and I are both acknowledging we're doing this, because this is kind of something about what I want to talk about. Do you want to start talking about what we're talking about?
No, I think you already have a launching off point. Why don't you start us off?
So the thought for today's podcast came from an Instagram post that I posted last night, and I hope we can perhaps share it. So we are recording this on November the 1st. Last night was Samhain, or Halloween, also my son's birthday. And yes, my wife did plan that. And Halloween is it's not a big thing for me, but it's a huge thing for our family. And so I know it's a huge thing, children getting dressed up, people getting dressed up at work and things. I think, okay, it's a big day. Then, did you hear that? Nope, good. Sorry, my phone just rang and it came through my headphones and came through on my computer. I lost my train of thought.
Halloween is very big for your family and for many families.
Yeah. We were thinking about how to respond to the blue pumpkins. And I posted last night, I'm not a fan of blue pumpkins.
Should we explain what the blue pumpkins are?
Sure, they're pumpkins who are blue. It is an idea that was posited. I'm not sure when it started, but in the last not too many years.
Few years, yeah.
4, 5, 10, whatever. And it's an idea that you have a neurodivergent child carry a blue pumpkin to indicate that they are neurodivergent. And it's come from very specifically autism. So
autism.
It's an autistic child carries a pumpkin that's blue that signals they're autistic. Now, there's a labeling problem with that. What it's doing is outing the child to the public in a way that they don't have a control over, and in certain respects, the public shouldn't really know about. So there's that outing aspect I don't like. But of course, the color blue comes from an organization that I don't support particularly, and they were certainly behind the whole thing. And we've had this idea of, I think it's Lighted Up Blue, was a hashtag on Instagram to try and support this idea.
Which was also one of the Autism Speaks sort of April things. They would call it Lighted Up Blue month.
And then the puzzle pieces there. And it's a big branding thing, and I'm uncomfortable with it. Mm-hmm. I'm uncomfortable with it. On the news yesterday, there was a story about a street in Laval, Quebec, where the entire street had taken this idea that they were going to put blue lights on certain houses. And what the blue lights meant was that the people in the house were aware of sensory issues and would not have flashing lights, not have loud, scary noises, and being inclusive, trying to be inclusive as possible. So my dilemma was, the blue ties it to Autism Speaks. Mm-hmm. The blue ties it to this idea of the blue pumpkin, which outs autistic children against their wishes, perhaps.
And not only outs, but it could be a safety issue. If adults know that children with the blue pumpkin are autistic, they're much more vulnerable, right? Mm-hmm. So,
and of course, it leaves adults out and blah blah blah. It's So there's that thing that in me, I don't like the blue. I don't like the blue pumpkin. But I have to acknowledge that street in Laval, they were doing wonderfully. They were trying their best. And it got me thinking, and this is our conference on the weekend, had two themes, advocacy and creativity. I wonder who came up with those. And from the advocate's point of view, here's the struggle. Do I complain about the blue? Or do I acknowledge that these people are doing a really, really good thing? And in fact, much as I don't like the blue pumpkins, those people who are aware of the blue and trying to make it more sensory friendly, like that's what we want.
And I love that, because it also is then the child and the potentially the parent or guardian's choice, which houses to approach. The ones that are going to be more predictable, that have indicated they're not going to have things jumping out and going off, bright lights everywhere. That is a really nice way. Like it is good to have some sort of indicator so people know that. Do I think it has to be specifically for autism? No, because sensory issues abound in our, not just our population, but general humanity population. But so I think it is a lovely gesture.
And to relate, the last time I went out with my children trick or treating. Now my kids are. My eldest is some magical number in the 20s, but my eldest daughter is 17 and my son turned 14 yesterday. So they're very independent. But I went with my daughter maybe 3 years ago. I don't like it, but it's my turn, and that's okay. This is parenting. This is what you have to do. It's not about me. It's about what your kids want. Yeah. Actually, just excuse me for a second. I'm going to cough like you wouldn't believe.
Okay. I don't believe it.
That was completely unbelievable. Well, I'm red. So we were out trick-or-treating. This is in the previous province we lived in. And we got to this one place where a school friend or a school acquaintance or somebody that my daughter went to school with bumped into us. And I still don't know if it was accidental or not. And it was we were both taken a little unawares. Okay. But then as we were approaching the house, the owner of the house came up in some scary, making loud noises and popping out of nowhere. And basically, I needed to run.
Yeah.
And my 12-year-old, however old they were, 12 or 13-year-old, also started to run because she's got general anxiety as well as her ADHD. And the guy started chasing us.
No.
And of course, everybody's thinking this is so funny, but we are close to being terrified.
Yeah.
It's difficult to say I was terrified because there is still that intellectual, it's Halloween and people are trying to be scary and things. But
you can't help your nervous system,
And that was it. We both could not go any further. And we'd gone maybe 20 minutes, we're out 15 minutes. And not normally we'd be, she would normally go out for an hour or so.
Yeah.
And it's that complete unawareness of sensory issues, which again, the blue is supposed to be helping. And the acknowledgement, the awareness of the blue light hopefully triggers on a whole bunch of other people that some of these things can be like ridiculously scary and inappropriate. But the core point for the discussion today is when you're advocating, how do you handle compromise? The street in Laval is something that needs to be celebrated, and that's my posting from last night, was to make sure that I'm very much celebrating what they were doing. I just wish it wasn't blue, and there's the compromise for me in there. So the thought now is, how much of advocacy, like where do we draw the line for compromise?
Well, and I think a lot of it also comes down to our spoons level as well. Because, for instance, you and I have talked a little bit about if we declined to be on panels or present at conferences where people were presenting on ABA or other things, we're removing a very important voice that potentially will not be represented if we don't go to those things. And so then it becomes ABA is the norm, or whatever it is the norm, and this is the evidence-based thing you're supposed to do. I feel we have, it's sort of incumbent upon us that we must do our best to be at these things. We must be okay being in a program with other speakers who are promoting different things than us, because there are going to be people in the audience who will be swayed by what we say, who have never maybe heard that perspective, and it's eye-opening, and they do more research and they realize there's a whole world of other voices suggesting neurodiversity affirming approaches that are just not in the mainstream. However, that said, I think, again, we have to manage our spoons. It's totally okay to not have the energy to do that. I always sort of see it as we are all sort of holding the mantle together. So sometimes I'm going to take a break from it. You're going to take a break from it. And hopefully someone else is there to do these things.
And you're raising a good point about appearing at a panel with presenters who are not having the same core values as you is incredibly valuable. And
it's difficult.
But also I think people think it's adversarial. And it's like, no, it's so I mean, when you and I speak about our non-fandom of behaviorism, we're doing it respectfully. And maybe we should talk about the fact that you and I had a discussion about a problem you had where ABA's solution was actually valid. Well, I shouldn't say valid, but like was worth investigating.
Yeah, sometimes when there's those safety issues and you need a sort of quicker, more immediate thing, I don't know what all the right answers are. What I do know is, like, we want to avoid having two separate echo chambers where there isn't really, our message isn't getting through. And then you just have these two sort of parallel but vastly different narratives happening. And there's a whole bunch of people who don't get exposure to our community.
And it's interesting you say that, because I did think about the post carefully, whether I should start with the praise and then the criticism. And I thought the criticism made sense to me, because I think that's what people who know me, that's kind of a more authentic voice. And when I have posted about Light It Up Blue before, I've often had people ask me, why? What are you saying? What's wrong with this? I thought blue meant this. And it's like, that's exactly why I do it. Mm-hmm. And it's not to say the general population should not use blue, because maybe blue does become the color as long as it becomes this elective community choice, rather than mandated from above type thing. We'll park that for a second. But, that the post is supposed to prompt questions.
And I'm certainly glad that broader society is becoming more aware of sensory needs. I think you're absolutely right to celebrate that this community is thinking about those things and is actually being somewhat proactive and doing something to support people who have sensory sensitivities.
It's amusing talking about that, where I'm not sure what it's like in your neck of the woods, but boy, people love fireworks here.
Yeah.
And I mean, they've been, we live in an area where there's a very, very large Indian population, and very specifically a Sikh population. Very, you may guess where I'm from by me even saying that. And so Diwali's coming up, and there is they use fireworks culturally to celebrate Diwali. Okay. But probably for a week or so, we've had fireworks going off almost every night. And then last night, they just went on. And there were some complaints on the Facebook group that was still being fired off at 12:30 this morning. Wow. And it's like, that is something. Fireworks were such a random thing where I used to live. What did you have? Do you have fireworks near you?
I mean, there are definitely fireworks at all of the big holidays. I can see a whole bunch from my balcony, actually, all over the place. But lately, no. So I haven't heard any, probably since maybe Labor Day, maybe one or two. Although that's not the big one. The big ones are Canada Day and Victoria Day, Queen Victoria Day.
We because of where we live literally on the border. July 1 and July 4 are pretty spectacular because we'll often, our apartment building has a penthouse at the top, a public shared penthouse. And we often will be out there for a couple of hours on July 4 watching fireworks going off in like 6 or 7 communities across the border. And that's, they like the fireworks too.
Yeah, I bet they do.
Our neighbors to the south. But, it's on July 4. There's been fireworks going off, randomly. And last night there was like official, city approved fireworks going off at a local park. But then there were just random fireworks going off everywhere else. And it's just strange. And it's terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
I despise fireworks. They really are. Anyway, obviously,
well, they're confusing for pets. They're and scary for pets and people with PTSD and a million other things I can think of why they are, not so great, especially at unpredictable times. It's sort of one thing if you can brace yourself, okay, today is the day, but people tend to extend long weekends and do fireworks every single day of the long weekend. And it's just, I mean, I'm getting a bit snarky, but I was about to say like the environmental impact. I'm sure there's an environmental impact as well.
Oh yeah, there's nothing
that redeeming about them.
And here's the thing, and going back to my point for all this was tangled up into the Halloween, is that I know people like that scary thing. People like scary movies. I don't understand it, but I get that. I get that. In fact, the kids were going to be watching The Shining, and my daughter was watching a schlocky early 2000s horror movie, and it's just like, I just don't get it. But that's okay. Being outside and then having these random explosions, or having people dressed up in kind of bad vampire costumes chasing you down the street, like, that's not cool.
No, it's not. No, I'm sorry that I'm giggling, but I'm sorry that happened to you.
Well, and yeah. And here it comes down to, if more people were aware of the blue pumpkins, is that a solution? And therefore, do I give up my objection to blue pumpkins for the greater good? And this is the compromise. It's interesting you bringing up us being on panels, real world examples. We're not compromising by being part of those panels.
Not at all. We're still speaking our perspective, and we're hoping that people who haven't heard that perspective, we can edge along, to think a bit differently about it. Maybe make a few converts in the crowd.
So that's not a compromise.
No, but I do know some people will take stands, and again, everyone should do what they're comfortable with. But some people will take stands and not want to take part in events that have any speakers they disagree with, any sort of talking points they disagree with. Yeah. Again,
so we had
spoons.
Go on. Sorry.
No, just the
Spoons.
idea of spoons. I understand if people don't have the energy to do that and don't have the want to do that.
You mentioned some people don't want to be by association with somebody, and we had I need to neutralize what I say here. During one of our panelists mentioned a famous autistic person who had coincidentally that morning said something rather political. And autism kind of tries to be extraordinarily neutral. But it became this we can't allow that person's name to be used. And it's like, that's tricky. You and I have a difference of opinion on Temple Grandin. And I'm going to bring this up just maybe for a truth perspective. I think the problem I have with Temple Grandin is a little unfair because she has been around for 20 years now as being
longer. Yeah.
Well, okay. Let's say 30
Since
years.
1980, she sort of started being the poster girl.
She's the poster girl. She's been the poster girl for so long, poster woman for so long. So when you look at some of the things she says now, it's like, well, no, I disagree with that. And then kind of you can forget. And I acknowledge that my criticisms of her is implicit to the fact that I'm also honoring what happened before that.
And that's completely fair too, yeah.
But it's then where does it flip? J.K. Rowling has flipped, for instance.
Yes, definitely. I think one of the difficulties, and this is a societal thing that we do, is because we make people represent whatever identity we see them as being, we then have to be more critical about the things that they say, because we're like, oh, she doesn't speak for everyone who's autistic. And I sort of approach it as every human is flawed. And so to me, I do see things that she has done that is good. I do see that Temple has an impact on a lot of neurotypical people, making them consider things they had never thought of before. And I see that as really important. I also think she was raised in a culturally specific context where she thinks for herself, she thinks masking has been a good thing. She thinks being taught, that's not polite, don't do that. The way her family raised her, she credits a lot of her own success to that. And that's fine. That's her perspective. That's her perspective on her own life. Where we get into trouble is when people extend messages, and I think that should apply universally to everyone else. So I can still be critical of things that someone like Temple Grandin says, but I also see that Temple has done some good, and I'm not going to outright condemn anything that or her as a person. I think we are all limited by our experiences and perspectives. You and I are very limited by our perspectives as white autistics, and there are a million things I am not comfortable speaking to because they're outside of my perspective. And I think because she's in the public eye in a way that I am not in the public eye, or you are not in the public eye, people really take her word and think it should apply to everyone. And that's the fundamental problem, is that instead of saying this is one person's perspective and one person's experiences and one person's thoughts, people think it should apply to all of us, and autism is not a monolith.
And it's very much, since I've come to being an official advocate late in life, I've had a lot of time to think about this. And I've advocated for a whole bunch of things throughout my life without sort of really realizing I'm doing it. And it is good to check in myself. Like, as I said, I've done 3 media interviews the last couple of days. And in fact, for one of these journalists who represents our national broadcaster, I've become a contact point to represent autism. One angle, and this is why this person is a really good journalist, because they're not just taking my perspective. But I always remember that I'm speaking on behalf of autistics as a community, on behalf of Autism Canada as an organization. But then I also can start talking about my lived experience, but making sure it's my lived experience. And you're quite right. It's like I said often on the weekend, and we had question and answer periods with every presenter. I raised it a couple of times. Like, I'm an old white guy. There's a whole bunch of things, and I'm speaking to that. A previous guest that we had on our podcast, Kristen, she was talking about the BIPOC community, but then we also realized that we were talking about female masking, and it came to me, and this ties into what you just said about Temple, is that Kristen was raised in a society that was rural and really conservative. And I've always lived in much bigger cities and usually in very liberal cities. And it's like, there's also a class thing that we don't talk about enough.
Yes, there is a huge class thing. And education and all of these privileges, these layers of privilege.
I think you and I have talked about education a lot. And that's good. That's our big interest. And you and I have talked about class, about access. I think that's super important. Kristen's idea, or the discussion with Kristen, raised in my awareness that I don't think of class in general enough. Where I'm much more, and I'm really, really active in trying to bring in gender fluid voices, BIPOC voices completely, LGBTQIA voices as much as I can. I need to be thinking about those people who are not in as, I'm not too sure how to say this. And the class thing is a problem because both my home country and where I live now, we really don't have, we have very strict class striations. We have very, very wealthy people, very, very poor people, but I don't know,
very
95%?
Large middle class.
Very, very large middle. And it's, it's difficult to start splitting that into traditional class boundaries from a Marxist perspective, but it's something I think I need to be thinking about a lot more.
I mean, I will often think about my experiences teaching autistic students in a very affluent neighborhood versus where I am now, which is closer to sort of the Jane and Finch community, which is known in Toronto as quite a marginalized community. Well, I would say I definitely have families that are from different classes. There's a huge difference in access for families, supports for families, understanding for families on behalf of like the adults. There's this assumption that is often made, and it's a really horrible one. And I think we have gotten into the habit of blaming parents, especially mothers, since like the 40s, refrigerator parenting. And now it's, parents don't care if they're not home to do homework with their children. No, they're working like 5 jobs. They care very, very much. Again, these are access issues and class issues, and not a matter of parents not caring about their children. But people will make assumptions, and that carries over into education. Teachers thinking families don't care, and although I think the majority of teachers get it now, like certainly when I entered the field, I felt like, that wasn't the case, but there have been some wonderful moves towards equity and really understanding different barriers that families face that you have no idea about as an outsider.
And I think you and I have talked about this before, of having students who wear the same clothes every day, mm-hmm. or have two pencils and that's all they have. And then your first thought used to be, why aren't they wearing clean clothes, and why aren't they bringing different pencils? Mm-hmm. And now we're much more aware of that's all they've got.
Yeah, exactly.
And how do we help that without being too obvious about it, mm-hmm. too embarrassing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And it is, I think that's something that I am aware of. And then this is very much talking about Bruce here. It's all about me. But it's something from the advocacy point of view where I try and be as inclusive as possible. And I'm now recognizing there is still often a community that I miss. Mm-hmm. And, in my defense, we live in a quite wealthy country. We live in a country that's generally a good health system, a good education system. People do in general care about each other. We're actually, there's lots and lots of really, really good things. And so it can be difficult to when you miss that. And we're looking at, we're building an Indigenous program at Autism Canada, trying to raise awareness of the problems the Indigenous communities have across the country with autism. But Indigenous is actually a code word for us for remote locations.
Yes.
You and I both live in very metropolitan areas, mm-hmm. and the chances of me being diagnosed if I lived not in Calgary, where I used to live, if I was living outside town a little bit, even Banff or some well-known resort town that does have lots of people, it doesn't have any resources for therapists. No. It doesn't have any psychiatrists. Like that just becomes, what are we supposed to do here?
Yeah. No, I've had friends who have worked in fly-in communities, fly-in reserves in their schools, and there's no access to anything. It's really hard to get any support, and whether that's psychologist or social worker, things like that, it's really, really tricky. Not necessarily embedded into the community. Like you might have to fly somebody out. It might take months and months if you get anyone at all. Yeah, lots of challenges, and again, I say this all the time, but we are all limited by our experiences. We don't know what we don't know, and I think it's important to recognize that and be open to learning and be open to what other people's perspectives are, and taking what helps you grow, and not beating yourself up for things you don't know either.
Yeah.
We grow as we go.
A question I was asking every presenter, mm-hmm. a question I was asking for every presenter was, when it comes to advocacy, how do you speak for people you don't have a connection with? Or especially when it comes to, how do you advocate for support that you don't particularly need?
Well, you recognize that first you listen. You have to listen to what other people are saying. I do think there's a lot that is universal in what we need. Things like predictability, understanding, not shaming, things like that. But then I think we have to be able to also say, for me, unmasking doesn't usually come with a fear of danger or something happening to me, whereas that is not the case for autistics who are also BIPOC, where unmasking could be dangerous. We need to talk about underdiagnosis in marginalized communities. We need to talk about using AAC. augmentative and alternative communication and presuming competence. You know, we need to make sure that the messages that we are hearing from autistics who have different experiences from us, that we also mention those things. You know, I'm not just speaking for autistics who are university educated and, you know, like, not at all. I don't like to think I'm speaking for autistics in general, but I am trying to help people who maybe have never heard any autistic perspective to understand sort of the range of supports that generally we all are in favor of.
I often do speak on behalf of a very large segment, a majority of the autistic community. And I'm still surprised on how often when I say, you know, I'm representing autistic adults, and don't forget there's more autistic adults than children. Mm-hmm. And almost every time I say that, I still see people going, mm-hmm. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. Why are we talking about all these lack of behavior interventions for under fours and mm-hmm. the lack of diagnosis availability for 2-year-olds when we've also got this huge amount of populations where there are literally absolutely no resources?
Yes, that's true.
And I kind of wish I could be a little more representing a wider variety, because very often I'm having to supporting like the autistic resourcing across the country at the provincial level is aimed towards children, aimed towards children, and then aimed towards those autistics who need
plunges off. Yeah.
Yes, and it and it literally is one of these. The day before your 18th birthday, you're fine. You turn 18 and suddenly everything is a disaster. You've lost all the money and you know, there's no supports and whatever. And then you get parents of those autistics who need a lot of support, mm-hmm. who can't get the support. And then they have this idea of, well, what do I do? Am I supposed to stop working? And yes, that is what happens sometimes.
Yeah.
I wish I could advocate for all of these things to be equal.
But I think part of the advocacy then is just speaking about these are the issues that are experienced in the autistic community. What are some of the issues we see around diagnosis? What are some of the issues we see around accessing support? You know, and you could talk about it at different age levels and different you know, from that intersectional perspective about who is impacted the most. I think part of awareness is just going, did you know this? Did you know?
And here we roll back into the compromise aspect.
Yeah.
A presenter did talk about, let me see if I can remember exactly what he said. Advocacy was about communication. There was another C word, but it meant teamwork. Community. Let's say community. If you didn't say community, community is a great response on compromise. And I grabbed onto the compromise. I thought that's a really interesting point. When I'm representing our community, I'm not even in the area of compromise yet, because it's exactly what you've just said. All I'm doing is basically saying, have you realized that there's nothing here? Have you realized that this is also a problem? I'm not even into the discussions yet on how can we work and what do we need to be doing. It's just more like we exist and there's a problem. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like Greg's 3-stage working with
model of child engagement. Yeah.
We haven't got to the engagement part yet because we're still working on 1 and 2 in a whole bunch of different things. And I'm aware of that. I am aware of it. And it's just kind of interesting how the communication and community aspect I've got, but the compromise is still not there because nothing's on the table to compromise.
Mm-hmm.
And that then raises a point here. From a national perspective, what do we need as adults?
I mean, again, it's to be overly simplistic. It is kind of the same as what children need. We need an individualized approach for each person, because we also have a problem with funding being attached to very strict guidelines. And, what if that's not what the child needs? What if they would be like, it would benefit them more to have, I honestly, I don't know what's covered or not covered, but I hear all the time parents want other things for their child that aren't necessarily covered. It's not individualized enough necessarily. And I think for adults, we want someone we can speak to and say, these are the barriers we're experiencing at work and life and, self-care and, making friends, feeling part of a community. Like, these are what I am struggling with, and what can help. Like, I feel like everyone needs a point person, like one, a social worker or somebody that can help you navigate for a couple of years. Maybe you trade off, have different social workers, but like a point person who is there to direct you to the individualized things that actually matter. It's kind of like, as a teacher, you have to sit through PD days where the PD is not something relevant to what you're teaching. I just sat through like a day on math and language and universal design for learning. I teach a course in one of those things. I don't teach math or language to my elementary learners at all. Like, I would have loved to have been able to say, you know what, I'm really interested in learning about. I'm really interested in learning about, strategies for learners who experience depression and anxiety. Like, you know what I mean? If I could have picked something that I felt was like substantially adding to my knowledge base and responding to my unique context.
You've actually raised it's a very common PD problem, isn't it? With
yes, it is.
Colleagues across the country that they have to go to PD that makes no sense. And of course, for me working in the performing arts, it's triply useless to go to a class on math and just because it's just like, at least from your perspective, there's certain elements that may be part of something that you're working on, just a little bit. There's just a little bit.
But even then, one PD session for the whole school, everyone teaches different grades. Like, how helpful can it be? Like, it's going to be too broad to adequately address anyone's needs.
Which is kind of interesting because your suggestion of the class about depression, and let's extrapolate that to mental health. A mental health PD is worth so much more. That's a subject that everybody has to deal with. Mm-hmm. But even then, if you're dealing with depression with a grade 1, there's a whole whack of things going on that go way over your pay grade, my friend. Mm-hmm. And we shouldn't be, as a society, we should not have children in grade 1 suffering from depression in a classroom. There is obviously something really that they need to fix for that individual person, family, whatever is going on. But let's say we get to grade 5 and grade 6 where you do start to have those, my son said it this morning, intrusive thoughts. Mm-hmm. And this is very natural part of child development, having intrusive thoughts about mortality, mm-hmm. about existence, moral questions. This is all kind of things.
Yes.
We seem to, though, get bigger problems nowadays. Yeah. And I think that's where a PD on that would be absolutely useful. And of course, the thing that always gets me is that you're not teaching PD classes all the time about neurodivergent learning. Because the thing I'm hearing across the country from colleagues who are teaching and even people who sometimes contact me is that there are more and more coded kids, there are more and more kids with diagnoses going in classrooms, and the teachers don't know what to do.
Well, one of my big problems is, I do turn down opportunities because I work in a school board. I can't take off a day. I can't take an unpaid day and go make money somewhere else giving a talk. So my hands are somewhat tied to doing advocacy work outside of school hours. So summers, evenings, weekends. And yeah, if I could make the shift, if I could figure out a way to become a full-time consultant somewhere, if anyone knows, anyone's listening, I would love a consulting job. But I also am very happy being a teacher. I'm very happy with the benefits that come with being a teacher, the pension, things like that, that I would be, it would be hard to walk away from and without a sure thing, So
let's talk about the Commonwealth here. And you know perfectly well that the thing that I wish for you the most is for you as a presenter to be doing this more around the world, because
I would be very happy.
I love you to bits, and I love what you say, and I love what you and I say, and I think it's super important. I think that's my wish for you. But I then think about the students you leave behind when you do that.
That's another thing that I think about too. I think so much of the work that I do comes from my direct work with students. I'm learning all the time. I'm developing, how I approach things as a teacher and a coach all the time from the children and teens that I work with. But I love presenting, and I'm a great presenter. I think I'm a better presenter than I am podcaster. I'm really good at presenting.
Oh. Yeah.
When I am prepared, I'm so good.
I've been standing next to you when you do it. I know. Actually, it's interesting. I will say one of the advantages of teaching in performing arts is that I'm never too sure if these were official PDs or unofficial PDs, but so often you will get a group of band teachers will get together. They'll go and have lunch, or they'll go and have a couple of drinks in the pub for a couple of hours. But one of them is talking about what they've been doing the last 6 months or a year. And it's colloquial. Colloquial? Is that no, hang on. Colloquialism. No, what's that called? Sorry. What my good friend the hummingbird has just popped into the hummingbird feeder. So it disappeared for a couple of months, and I got really sad, and it started to appear a lot more. Anyway, they get together, and one person leads discussion about some of the thoughts, some of the procedures they've been, struggles they've been doing with their band, or some of the tricks they've been doing with their band. And it's that is the super most effective PD.
Yeah.
And the drama teachers will often do it when they have play competitions. Mm-hmm. The teachers they'll go into play conditions, and your students are about to go on and do their presentation, and the next 3 schools are up. The teachers are all in the back, constructively gossiping. And I mean that in the sense they're talking about, this person's going to do a disaster because they can't handle this. And then someone says, oh, did you think about this type of approach? And it's it's such a collegial way of working together.
That's what we need more time for. Yes. That's what research shows. My dissertation was all about teacher professional development needs. And it was we need more time to talk to colleagues, to address our what's relevant to our unique classroom contexts. We want expertise from other teachers who know what the reality of teaching and the difficulties of it. And we want our own expertise recognized. We don't want someone just coming in and telling us you need to do this, this, and this. We want people who recognize we not only have degrees in the subject, we have experience and intuition. And we've been doing this, many of us, for a long time now. And
there is also that flip, which I think is often not considered enough, that some of your students at university are going to have a very broad perspective than a teacher that maybe had been teaching for 10 years does not.
I am impressed. One of the reasons I love teaching at the university and in the education faculty, even though it's like tiring to come home on a Monday and immediately start teaching a 3-hour evening class. I just am so inspired by the knowledge, the compassion, the conviction that we need to do a better job of making classrooms accessible and meeting the needs of everyone. They know so much more than I knew going into education. They're eons ahead. And I'm so excited for them to enter the profession and make changes from the inside, plant those seeds.
We're back to advocacy and that community, aren't we? Of not just standing up for what you want, but standing up for what you and colleagues need. Mm-hmm. And being open to hear all those voices. Mm-hmm. I do think it's a couple of years ago, I was at a post-PD session, and in Calgary, they have very large teacher conventions. Like all the teachers get together.
I remember you telling me about that.
Yeah. So I think today or yesterday was Faith Day in the Calgary Catholic system, and literally every single high school teacher comes into a big auditorium, and it's Catholic, so they have a mass, but they do presentations and things. Sometimes pretty strange. And the idea that you would have a teacher, and this day, I remember there was a big push on technology, and they had one person come in, give a talk from Microsoft or IBM or something, who had absolutely zero educational experience and completely useless. But the other presenter was somebody who'd been teaching for 20 years, who was assigned this project and was trying to fit technology into the way they were doing things, where every single 20-year-old would be going, oh, well, there's these 3 apps that you just put this on your phone, the iPad, and that's how it works. Yeah. It's like, that's where using the younger and
with the new knowledge. Yeah, it's fantastic. I think the majority of teachers, this is going to be a sweeping generalization, but I think we do consider ourselves lifelong learners, and we will, as long as we are not completely burnt out, we are very open to learning from other teachers, including new teachers, because we know that they come in with a passion and energy and all of these wonderful ideas that can really enhance our classrooms too. Like, sharing knowledge is such an important thing.
So now let's do another sweeping generalization. Look, listeners and watchers, we have dance movements now.
Yes.
I'm assuming you're a 10,000 times better dancer than I, because I am right at the bottom.
Dancing is like public dancing is probably one of the things I dread most in life. That would be like my worst nightmare. I try to avoid dancing in front of anyone ever.
And yet we probably both could go and hit our marks with no problem.
I don't know.
Like walking naturally on stage. Okay. Do you see public advocates who are also as open as you generalize with teachers?
Advocates from our community?
Yeah.
That's a hard one to comment on. Like, I think when you come from a community like ours, where you might have had a lot of experiences not being heard, being shut down, I have been very lucky as someone late diagnosed, not really having that added layer of stigma that might have come had everyone known I was autistic as a child, you know? But so I think there can be a defensiveness that is understandable, but can maybe get in the way sometimes of conversations and being able to compromise. But again, that comes down to spoons, comes down to, are you do you have the energy and the will and the want to participate in some of these settings, which will be harder, where, it can be very triggering to feel like you're, in a setting with people who have fundamentally different values about how you should have been treated or should be treated now.
That's a good answer. And it was a leading question because I instinctively had a different gut opinion, but I think I completely agree with you, like 100%. I was going to say, not to criticize anybody actually, but let's say that there are a number of advocates that I have met in the last couple of years, some with you, who I think are absolutely wonderful because they are so open. And I think the thing about it is I'm recognizing how they're open, and so therefore I'm recognizing some other people are more closed. But you have raised that good point of, if somebody seems closed, there's possibly good reasons for. And, welcome to the autistic brain. I think fundamentally, this is one of these things where I can quite honestly just be completely autistic and say, look, there are a number of autistics and a number of famous autistics I really don't like because I find them too closed. Boom. Now, I'm actually not criticizing them or thinking they're bad. It's just that I find them closed. Their ideas are a little, not where I want. I'd like to be a little more open, but that's okay. Mm-hmm. And I think too often when you say that, I think neurotypicals sort of think, oh, it shouldn't be criticized, it should be positive. And it's like, saying, I'm not, they're not bad people.
Well, and there's a different. We also can't have it both ways, right? Like, if we want people to treat us like any other human being, we can't just have a universal blanket statement that all autistic people are wonderful, amazing, you have to like them. No, they're people. You're going to have people you like and people you don't like. And that's part of the human experience, autistic or not.
There are autistic advocates who I've met and been in close proximity with, and they are jerks. And there are probably other advocates who think I'm a jerk, and that's okay. I try not to be, and if I am, I apologize if I've done something wrong. If I did mean it, well, but it's kind of interesting that wanting, and I think it's me wanting. Our experiences have come from such a narrow perspective. And I think we've hit the point now where we need to open up. Mm-hmm. And it's that, including BIPOC, including class-based, including gender fluidity, it's a big thing. As you said before, there are some subjects that you feel uncomfortable with. That is, I am very white straight, have a very gender fluid family, mm-hmm. which still amuses me and confuses me and makes me feel awesome and wonderful. But I don't want to talk about gender, mm-hmm. because there's other voices that need to speak about gender.
Well, maybe we need to start pulling a Greta. So Greta Thunberg, when she presents, she doesn't present if there aren't BIPOC voices, and she will frequently not speak and will allow other people to speak before her. And maybe that's, I would love, I say this all the time, and we've reached out to people and haven't necessarily heard back. I know, like, we're trying to get people on the podcast who have other experiences than we have. Because I don't want to be the only voice. And I certainly, like I said, I don't want to speak for every autistic person, but I do want to help people who don't have an understanding of some of those sort of common autistic experiences, chronically feeling like an outsider, feeling judged under a microscope, micromanaged in so many ways, not given the patience to allow us to communicate and express our feelings and our needs. Whether you're a speaker, a non-speaker, a semi-speaker, or anywhere in between. So I think I try to get people realizing that we are human beings, that we have needs, that we deserve supports, that we deserve understanding, to sort of check your assumptions and get curious. Get curious about what is going on for each individual person and how they are experiencing, whether it's the classroom, their home life, their community life. What is their idea of well-being?
And we should not compromise on that.
No. I'm mindful of time. We should do thing of the day. Thing of the day is over to you, Bruce.
Okay. So one of the presenters at the Awesome Conference, in fact, they were the keynote speaker on the second day, was a advocate from Australia named Yen Purkis. And I asked Yen to speak about advocacy because that was the work that I knew about. But once I said that the other theme of the conference was creativity, they said, oh, I have a degree in fine arts. And in fact, they're a painter. And their paintings were quite interesting, actually. And, they have a degree in fine arts and drawing. And I think that's pretty amazing. So it was a really, really good conversation with Yen, which I would encourage everybody to listen once it's up on YouTube. But Yen also writes books and writes, I think she's got 15 books. I may be counting the ones that are in the middle of writing. But the one I'd like to highlight today is called The Autism and Neurodiversity Self-Advocacy Handbook. And it's by Barb Cook and Yen Purkis. And Yen is spelled Y-E-N-N.
Okay. Sorry, I have to spell things in the air to see them.
That's good. Do they smell?
No.
Synesthesia. Yen is very. They are. My apologies, Yen. They are a very vibrant person and a super strong advocate. So I have read little bits of this book, and what's I think important. I want to raise this book today is I'm aware of quite a number of books about advocacy, but this was the first one that I can think of that was about self-advocacy, and it. With the I was having preparation for the conference and talking to. I was talking to Yen, but also to a speaker who didn't actually present, but hopefully will present next year. We were talking about self-advocacy as about how bad advocates are as being self-advocates. And I think I've raised this with you before. And this book is something that's going to be on my shelf in a couple of weeks because I need that reminder. I need those steps, things that I need to remember about self-advocacy. And the one point I would like to share from the conference, the point that they made that was the strongest, I think, was when we were talking about self-advocacy, they said, make sure you talk to your community. I'm going to cough again, excuse me.
Make sure you talk to your community.
And very specifically, if you've got an advocacy problem, make sure you talk to other autistics or other neurodivergents, because they've probably had a similar problem and they may have a solution for you. And I thought again, I often have to wear this advocate hat, and I am approached and seen as being an advocate, but there's things about these things that I need to be reminded about. Check in, and I often talk to you about advocacy aspects. You and I talk about some problems I have quite often, like advocacy problems, but it's like, I need to remember to broaden that a little more. So that's my thing of the day.
I can't wait to read it. That sounds like a really helpful resource. And we don't have enough that sort of teaches us how to advocate for ourselves and like kind of just sort of muddle through and try and figure it out. Sometimes more successfully than others. Even as an individual, right? Like there are times I am absolutely horrible at getting out any words about what I'm feeling or what I'm needing. And at other times I seem to be okay. It's so variable.
And also, like, I'm writing a course, like a literacy program for Autism Canada about advocacy. And this is kind of the whole germ of the conference has come from this course. But one of the aspects about the course was talking about self-advocacy and talking about how that it's the first advocacy we should be looking at always. And I know you concentrate a lot in your classroom, and you and I talk about this, and you leading this about IPPs, IEPs, about how important self-advocacy is and what that means.
Yeah. What does the student want? What are their goals? What supports, what do they see are the barriers? Because if you make a guess and you're wrong as a teacher or a parent about it, like, you're not going to help them by applying the wrong solution. If you're attributing the problem to the wrong thing, students are our best resources. We have to ask them about their experiences. Anyhow, that's a whole other episode. I think we should wrap it up here. I have to call my dad. He sent me an email just as we were beginning this podcast saying, "Oh, I want to have a phone call tonight." So I feel like, yes, I should. I haven't talked to him enough. So he's another wonderful person in my life and a wonderful dad. So yeah, I want to go call him. But
you're making me feel like I should also see if my dad's awake.
Oh, well,
he lives in a different, like,
he did just send you money. You should thank him for that.
Why did he send me money again? There's something that happened here.
Yeah. I don't know. It has something to do with a couple of numbers.
Okay.
You're like, this is awkward.
Anyone who can't tell, I don't do birthdays very well.
No,
I've never. There's some reasons why they weren't a big thing when I was growing up, mainly to do with the school year in Australia, because normally around my birthday, the school has finished.
Oh, yes, that's right. This is the summer holidays.
Well, you're getting close to the summer holidays. So by the time in grade 11 and 12, we had a fourth semester final, if that makes sense.
Oh, I think you froze, Bruce.
Everything's finished.
Oh, there we go. So you froze for a moment there.
So did you.
Okay. We'll see what happens on the video.
Okay, that's enough about non-existent birthdays.
Okay.
Thank you, Kara.
Thank you, Bruce. It was delightful chatting as always, and just going in blind, unprepared. As usual, thank you. I've been so busy. I appreciate you picking today's topic and getting us started.
Thank you for the discussion, as always.
And thank you for sticking with us. Take care, be well, take care of one another.
Bye.
Tidbits